Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight I've got Geoff Hunt on. Geoff is the Group Commercial Director of Arup, 20,000 employees, 44 countries, and a £2.5 billion turnover. Geoff, I couldn't really get my head round those numbers. They're fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a bit about your backstory, Geoff, and then we'll go on to some of the tricky negotiations that you've been involved in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Derek, and hello, everybody. Delighted to be here. So my backstory is I have a degree in civil engineering, which I got a long time ago here in the UK. And I decided that the only thing that was interesting in civil engineering was to go and work for a contractor out on sites, so overseeing construction. So I did that for a few years. And then, of course, proved myself wrong that wasn't the only interesting thing to do in engineering, and moved into consultancy. So I've been a consulting engineer, chartered civil and chartered structural engineer for about 40 years. And worked my way through working for a really small consultant through a medium size, and I've been at Arup for 23 years this year. And worked my way through. I've had business development roles, I've had project delivery roles, I've led big teams of people. Commercial director, I've been the chief operating officer for Arup in the UK, India, Middle East, and Africa. And I've been now group commercial director, so sitting across the top of our regional structure for the past 3 years. But in all of those kind of last 15, probably 20 years, definitely 20 years, been involved in negotiations of one form or another, Derek. Fees, sometimes in dispute, sometimes not in dispute, sometimes at the start of a project. So a whole range of stuff that we have to negotiate. And I think the common feature to all of those negotiations, whether they are kind of proactive at the start of a project or a bit reactive because we're in a difficult situation at some point during or at the end of the project. They're never about money alone. Fee is certainly a factor, but we're usually trying to negotiate something around future obligations or insurance or getting approvals or something like that. So it's fee forms a part of that mix, but it's not the only thing that we're trying to negotiate.
It's very interesting, Geoff, isn't it? People think that price is the only thing in negotiations, and yet all those variables, those extras, those small things that don't actually cost very much, but could cost the other side a lot of money, or could be very valuable to you, are really important. We travelled together, didn't we, to the Middle East, to Qatar and to Dubai, which was quite good fun. You were in some pretty tricky negotiations, despite the fact that we were doing the training at the same time. You did one negotiation, which was on a $25 million project. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because there was some interesting dynamics there.
Yeah. So this was a project for a metro system that we were designing in the Middle East. We were designing one of the packages. We were working for a contractor, and we got into some trouble, or the project got into some trouble. Things were running late, and there was a lot of variations, a lot of scope change in the project, which was being contested by our client and by their client. So we were working for an intermediary, and so there was at least another 2 levels of approval beyond our client. And we needed to negotiate a final account a long time before the end of the project, because we were, hurting from a cash and profit perspective very substantially. So we needed to negotiate a $25 million fee extension. Actually, Derek, the project was in the billions in construction terms, but our fee we needed to negotiate, and so the claim on the table, if you will, was $25 million US dollars. And we tried negotiating kind of face to face in various meetings, started nibbling away at it, but it was pretty clear actually that there was no real appetite on their part to do anything meaningful. And so the contract allowed for mediation. So we had 2 mediations actually in London. and they're big things. There were kind of 20, 25 people around, around the mediators table. And both sides with in-house lawyers and in-house technical advisors and external lawyers and counsel, etc. So there's a big audience on the day. And I was pitched up against their commercial director, who turns out was the polar opposite of my style, Derek. He was somebody that liked to stamp and throw his papers in the air and slam the table and get up and shout, and that's not the way that I could have conduct myself. So the louder he got, and he did get very loud, the louder and the noisier he got, the quieter I got. And the fact that I was getting quieter as he got louder just made matters worse for him, because I wasn't joining in his in his style of negotiation. He several times, he said, "You can't just sit there and be quiet and quietly disagree with me. We've got to have an argument. We've got to have we've got to wave our fists at each other." And in the end, with the negotiation like that, we took some time out from that mediation. And I said to the mediator in one of our private meetings, this isn't going to work. Either I have to change, we have to get somebody from Arup to sit at the same table and behave as he does, or the other side have to change, and I have to, I'm going to work with somebody more rational, in my view, more akin to my style. So that mediation finished. It failed as a mediation over 2 days, and then the negotiation started with somebody, much calmer, in my view, more professional, but that's personal opinion. But somebody who you could have a rational argument with, you could sit down quietly and say, well, we just disagree on that point, don't we? So there was no shouting and barging and banging going on when we eventually sorted it. And I think the strength of having other people with you is, in a cast of 25 sitting around a table, you can't possibly look and observe all those 25 people and listen to what's being said, to kind of influence your next steps in that mediation. So the benefit of having people around you is that they can just kind of watch their opposite numbers, if you will. And they can watch how they are reacting to what their side is saying and how we're reacting to that and how they are reacting to what we say. In the end, it did settle, Derek, but it settled outside of the mediation about 6 months later.
Wow.
And in the end, we pitched our CEOs against each other.
Okay.
Of course, you can't do that. You can't do that too often. You can probably only do that once in a negotiation where you say, look, I've got to this figure. I'm not going to be able to do any better. You might be able to do better, but here are the kind of, the 6 points to the argument. And the CEOs met, as it happens, in America, and settled the deal about 6 months later on a number. But it was, there were terms around that as well. We wanted to be released from some of our insurance obligations. We wanted, payment of the settlement figure, in a reasonable time frame, and we wanted to have. There were various obligations on us to satisfy third parties, not in our contracts. So we wanted release from some of those as well. So in the end, we got those, but. That was a hard fought thing. So that the kind of the entirety of the negotiation, including the two failed mediations, was probably 2 years.
Wow.
So there was a lot in it for us.
Just winding what you said back a little bit, people are quite surprised when I tell them that you should be briefing your own team and certain people should be watching certain people on the other side. And then when you take a break and a timeout, you can discover what the body language or what the feel or what the sense was about what they've got to do. Clearly, you'd structured that and you'd led that internal meeting before you went into it.
We'd had a number of preparation meetings, Derek, before we went in. We knew who, in a mediation, you have to declare who's going to be in the room from both sides. So you get those names kind of a week or 10 days in advance, whether they're going to bring counsel with them or the seniority of their legal team, whether they're going to bring their technical team with them, their technical leadership, because you then need to be able to have the right people on your side to be able to counter their technical argument. Because, as somebody that's leading the negotiation, I wasn't involved in the technical aspects of the project at all. This was kind of the remit of me as the chief operating officer at the time. So, you need those technical people alongside you, because they are kind of strengths and weaknesses to your argument. And they say, yeah, but you didn't do that. And we need to be able to say, yes, but we did, but you didn't. So, we need those technical people in the room to be able to kind of read the room and then respond accordingly. So it's most definitely a team effort in those big mediations.
And they do need a clear briefing, don't they, before you go into it, to make sure everyone's actually on the same page.
Yeah, and sometimes, Eric, it's the order that you take things in. So, normally, if you think about, we've got plates spinning on fee, insurance, upstream liability, third-party rights, and we've got them all spinning, and we want them to land in the right place for us. Sometimes you have to box a bit clever about what order you're going to take it in. And fee isn't the obvious first choice sometimes. Sometimes you need to talk about other things that are not fee, because fee is, usually quite an emotive thing. And it's quite good to be able to get something in the bag early on in that negotiation, which is great. So we've agreed on the insurance thing. Fantastic. Thank you very much. We can bank that as an agreement between us. Now move on to something else. Okay, we need to park that. Now we move on to the fee. So by the time you get to the fee, you've got a win chalked up on the board. You've got one other subject that you started talking about but haven't resolved. And then you need to come back to the things that you haven't resolved during the course of the mediation or negotiation. But I would say that of the mediations we do, most of them don't settle on the day. Most of them settle following week, following month. In this instance, about 6 months later.
What's the cost of a mediation like that, Geoff? What was the
cost of a mediation, if you think about everybody's time for both parties and all the preparation? Probably 100,000 sterling, I would think. That never totted it up, but you've got a lot of people in the room on the day, plus all the preparation time, and you need to prepare papers and submit those to the mediator. You're paying for the mediator's fee jointly. So yeah, I would have thought 100,000 for a project for a disputed sum of that complexity. I would think 100,000 without too much difficulty.
Now, Geoff, you were telling me about another mediation where you got a bit of luck on a WhatsApp call. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is another infrastructure project in the UK with a European contractor, and project got into trouble. We had a claim for additional fees for prolongation and disruption for the delivery of our services, and the contractor had some counterclaims against us, and we were negotiating, in the kind of 5 to 10 million sterling arena, Derek. We probably already were in for half a million sterling of legal costs. So this was an online mediation. It was done just as we were coming out of lockdown, so it was there were some people online and some people face to face, so it was quite difficult to kind of manipulate to navigate that. We sat around the table. So we had a team. We had our counsel and lawyers and technical people, and so because we were part hybrid and part in the room, we had a little WhatsApp group going between us, between our side. And one of the people in the room, and unbeknown to me, was a fluent speaker in this European language. And he WhatsApped and said, "They're discussing your last point, Geoff, and I think they're going to agree it." And I said, "Okay, how can you tell that?" He said, not only am I fluent in the language, I can also lip read as well. So I had a lip reader in that foreign language on my team. I didn't know that at the start. So we were able to exploit that a little, shall we say, and to the point I made earlier about kind of getting some early wins. We then sort of changed the order of there were kind of 3 or 4 things on the table. Fee was one. 3 or 4 things on the table, and we then changed the order such that we could sort of play to their positivity about one non-fee related thing to bank that early in the negotiation, and that was that was a bit of luck. We've since have WhatsApp groups now for most of those mediations that we do, such that we can communicate, particularly if we're doing remotely out with clients and participants outside of the UK. We can read the sort of digital room as well as reading the physical room. So yeah, that was a bit of luck. That was helped us to a degree. We were negotiating in that instance. Our client was negotiating the exit from the project, their exit from the project. They were finishing it early. It had gone wrong for them, so there were kind of 2 negotiations at play. And they were caught in the middle of, they chosen to be in the middle. So they were trying to negotiate upstream with their client to get out of the project, as well as sorting us out below, if that makes sense. Our problem was we had a warranty back to their client directly as well. So we kind of had a number of a number of things going on at the same time, which is quite tricky. But certainly the language and the lip reading really, really helped in the mediation.
I don't think that was luck, Geoff. I think that was when preparation met opportunity. But
Oh,
then
is that right? Okay.
I would say that, wouldn't I?
All right.
How many in-house lawyers do you have? Because you must have in-house lawyers and external lawyers. I was just thinking it's so complicated what you were just describing.
Yeah. So we have a team in the UK of about 25 probably in our legal team in the UK. And then we've got legal teams in America and East Asia and Australia and Europe, etc. And a lot of them dealing with contracts up front, so helping us negotiate the right contracts to start with. And of course, we hope never to need them ever again, because lots of our projects go really, really well, and we don't need the lawyers to run the projects for us, but they help us get into the right place. And then so some of them do that, and then some of them sit in what we call our sort of disputes team when things go wrong, and then we get them on board as soon as we think there's going to be a problem. We get them on board to start giving us some advice. We don't ever hand the problem over to them until it goes truly legal. That is to say, that a mediator was appointed or somebody's adjudicating, or heavens above, we get into litigation, which we try to avoid. But and they're good. They get to the nub of the problem pretty quickly. But they also help us get over the inbuilt kind of resistance to do a deal. That is to say, but I've done nothing wrong. They're wrong on that point. So getting them to, they help us kind of see the bigger picture. Well, we have to get to a settlement. So you have to kind of philosophically give way on something, even if we acknowledge you haven't done anything wrong. I get that completely, but get over your scruples, because there's a deal to be done here. That's what we're sitting around the table to do. We're here to solve it. So you have to swallow hard and accept that it's not quite what we want. And like all good negotiations, everybody has to leave slightly hard done by.
Sure. Now, Geoff, when we were working together, you had a story about something that happened at Paddington Station with the Middle East. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. This was great. So it was a project in Qatar, and we had finished the project and we had a fee claim on the table, and we tried to claim. It's really difficult in Qatar, and you wouldn't, you don't enter kind of legal action in Qatar or in some other places in the Middle East without taking a deep breath. But so we had decided not to do that, but the claim was still on the table, and we had written it off, Derek. We said we're not going to take legal action. We'll just take the loss, and that's a shame, but there it is. And then about 2 years later, I got a call. I got a message early in the morning as I was getting the train from Wales into London. So this would have been a message at about 5 a.m. my time. saying, would I ring this? They said this was the client for the Qatar. Would I ring this number at 7:30 my time in the morning? So, yep, I got off the train at Paddington at 7:30 and rang them. And they said, this is the client for this particular project, and we would like you to we'd like to settle your fee claim. And I said, right, okay, well, that's good news, thank you very much. Look, I haven't got it in front of me, so I was caught very much unawares, Derek. I didn't know what the call was about. So I took a few details down and said, look, I'm not about to agree that number now. I need to go and do some homework and remind myself what it was about, because this thing's about 3 years old at this point. So I sat at Paddington Station, listened to the conversation, their justification for what they wanted to pay us, and said I would ring them back a couple of hours later. So a quick call to the Qatar office, and we found out that what the client needed was a clean bill of health from their auditor in Qatar. So the auditor needed to be able to say this client has no claims against them, and without that they couldn't win their next project or their next big development tranche land. So that put it in slightly different context, was that these people needed to settle. I didn't know anything about the project, but by the time I got into the office, I went into the finance systems, found the project, could see the loss we'd taken, and then I spoke to the project director and said, I haven't got long here, but you've got 10 minutes to tell me about the history of the project. So he did that, and I said, okay. And what was the claim size? The claim size was whatever. I genuinely can't remember what the number was, but they were offering about a quarter of it, Derek. They were offering so I think there was kind of like doing 25 cents in the dollar or something to settle this. So I then rang back the client in Qatar when I said I would, and he then said, thank you very much, you're live on the speakerphone to a meeting of the board, and there's all these people, there's about 30 people in the room. And I said, okay. So I set out, I thanked them for their offer, and I said, I'm not going to accept that, knowing that they needed the clean bill of health. This was going to be worth something to them. Now, it was also worth something to us because we'd written the loss off. So whatever we got in at this point was all upside to our accounts. This is all going to land as extra cash, extra profit. So, it was, I was going to be a hero, whatever happened. And I said, no, we're not going to accept 25 cents in the dollar. I need to be paid in full. And they said, well, we're not going to pay you in full. I said, okay, well, I need you to consider our counter offer, please, and come back to me. So we had a couple of conversations in the next kind of half an hour or so, and I got 90 cents in the dollar in the end. I cannot remember what the number was, but it's in the order of £1 million sterling or something like that. That was the size of the thing. So it was worth hanging out for. But the real success there was having the internal intelligence and having the network of people that you could ring. Qatar were 4 hours ahead of us, so they were in the middle of their day, so they were very much sort of in work, if that makes sense. If this had been an American client wanting to do a deal at 7 o'clock UK time, everybody would have been asleep, I guess, in New York. But so that network, a bit of luck being able to get hold of the right person, got the records on file, found them fairly straightforwardly, but the big thing was knowing that they needed this clean bill of health and they needed it quickly, which was why we got 90% of the fee claim paid. So so they put me under pressure time to agree the deal at 7:30 in the morning at Paddington, but actually they'd put themselves under pressure. because they needed the clean bill of health from the auditors. So it's yeah, that was good.
Win-win. Sounds like win-win, Jeff. Didn't they? I seem to remember you told me that they also tried the time pressure. You need to agree this because we got the board together in this room at that point, which is what Trump tends to do all the time. Although smart negotiators know that we're not going to be pressurized by a false deadline.
No, I think that's right. And I remember in the second conversation, which was, you've been quiet on this for 3 years, and now you're giving me half an hour where you're expecting me to agree to something. You have to give me sufficient time to at least go and look at the records, at least go and have a look at the accounts. I can't access those from Paddington Station, for goodness sake. Actually, I could have done, but anyway, it's what I wanted was time to speak to the office. I wanted time to speak to the cat eye, which was, what's the context? Why these people suddenly rang me, having been silent for 3 years? Why are they suddenly now ringing me, offering to settle? And it was this context of they need the clean bill of health from their auditor, and whether they knew that we knew that, I don't know, but it worked in our favour.
Jeff, we're nearly out of time, but there's one thing I wanted to mention to you about going to see people. We were discussing this. I'm a big fan of looking people in the eye and getting on a plane or getting on a train and going seeing people, because it's very difficult to be quite as aggressive as you can be on an email when you actually shake hands with people.
Absolutely. I think negotiating by email is dreadful, or Teams message. You've got to do it face to face, and ideally face to face being literally face to face. Go and meet them for a cup of coffee, jump on a train. Easy thing to do in the UK, but because sometimes you get a completely different perspective of where they're coming from when you meet them face to face. So, what's important to you to get out of this negotiation? Is it speed? Is it money? Is it release of obligations? What have you got going on upstream in your business that's affecting you? Can you do the deal? Where's your pressure coming from? Etc. And you won't get that from an exchange of emails. So that's got to be a cup of coffee or a glass of water or a beer or whatever it happens to be.
Absolutely, Jeff. There's a lot of takeaways there from your negotiation experience, and we're very grateful for you coming on, taking a time out, managing the time, having a network, real preparation, teams operating together, huge amount of takeaways. Jeff, you must be a very resilient man to have that job that you have. Have you always been like that?
Yeah, I think so. I've been used to getting knockbacks. Not everything goes our way. We don't win them all, by any means. But as an engineer, I'm a problem solver. So I like to work my way around and through a problem. So who do I have to pick off in an earlier conversation? What's their problem upstream? How do I help them solve their problem so they can solve my problem? So that's the problem solver in the engineer in me that comes through in those kind of arrangements.
Well, thanks so much for joining Monday Night Live. We're very grateful for you to take a time out and be with us. And perhaps you might join us next year with some more stories, because
happy to.
We all learn from the stories. Geoff Hunt, thanks for joining Monday Night Live, and I hope you'll stay on for a few questions. Can I ask members of Monday Night Live to give you the usual vote of thanks for giving up your valuable time? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Been great.